In a peaceful little town, where life moved at its own gentle pace, two extraordinary sisters lived. Claire and Chloe Harper were identical twins, so alike that even their parents sometimes struggled to tell them apart. But there was one thing that set them apart from everyone else: their minds. From an early age, they displayed a sharp intellect that left teachers amazed. By the time they graduated high school, they had already earned scholarships to prestigious universities. At just 22 years old, both sisters graduated at the top of their class from Harvard Law School. Despite their incredible achievements, Claire and Chloe didn't chase fame or wealth. Instead, they returned to their hometown, determined to make a difference in the lives of ordinary people. They opened a small law office, offering affordable legal help to those who couldn't afford big city lawyers. Their clients adored them, not only because they were brilliant, but also because they cared deeply about justice. What no one knew, however, was that the twins had a quirky habit. They would occasionally switch places during court cases. This playful trick often threw opposing attorneys off balance, giving the twins an edge without breaking any rules. Life seemed perfect for the Harper sisters until one fateful evening when everything changed. A wealthy businessman named Richard Caldwell was found dead in his luxurious mansion. The police investigation quickly hit a dead end, until evidence surfaced that pointed directly to Claire and Chloe. It started with fingerprints found on a glass at the crime scene, followed by security footage showing someone resembling the twins near the mansion late at night. Then came witness statements claiming they had argued with Caldwell over a property dispute weeks earlier. Suddenly, the once-beloved attorneys became prime suspects in a shocking murder case. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community. How could these kind-hearted women be involved in something so sinister? For Claire and Chloe, it felt like a nightmare come true. They insisted they were innocent, but the evidence stacked against them looked damning. As they sat in handcuffs, staring at each other in disbelief, they made a silent agreement. They wouldn't reveal their true identities as skilled attorneys. Not yet. They wanted to see if the system they trusted so much could still work for them, even when the odds were stacked against them. But fate had other plans. When they appeared before Judge Lawrence Grayson, a stern man known for his tough sentences, things took a turn for the worse. He dismissed their pleas of innocence, viewing their calm demeanor as arrogance. And as the trial unfolded, it became clear that someone had gone to great lengths to frame them. Every piece of evidence seemed too convenient, almost as if it had been planted deliberately. Still, Claire and Chloe remained quiet, biding their time. Unbeknownst to everyone in that courtroom, including the judge, the real battle was just beginning. Behind their composed expressions lay two brilliant minds, plotting their escape from this twisted web of lies, and preparing to turn the tables on those who thought they'd won. The trial moved forward at a rapid pace, and Claire and Chloe found themselves navigating a legal storm unlike anything they had ever faced. Despite their expertise, they chose to remain silent about their qualifications, believing that justice would eventually prevail on its own. They sat quietly beside their assigned public defender, a well-meaning but inexperienced lawyer named Mark, who seemed overwhelmed by the complexity of the case. The twins watched as he fumbled through arguments, failing to challenge the prosecution's questionable evidence or expose the holes in their narrative. The prosecutor, a seasoned attorney with a reputation for securing high-profile convictions, seized every opportunity to paint the twins as cold and calculating killers. He presented the planted fingerprints and security footage as undeniable proof of their guilt. To make matters worse, he twisted their habit of switching places during trials into something sinister, claiming it showed a pattern of deception. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he declared dramatically, pacing back and forth in the courtroom, "these defendants have spent their lives pretending to be someone they're not. Is it any surprise they would lie to cover up a crime?" Judge Lawrence Grayson, already irritated by what he perceived as the twins' lack of remorse, grew increasingly impatient, his stern gaze fixed on Claire and Chloe as if trying to intimidate them into confessing. When Mark attempted to argue that the evidence was circumstantial, The judge cut him off sharply, warning him not to waste the court's time. The atmosphere in the room was suffocating, yet the twins remained calm, exchanging subtle glances that only they understood. They knew the odds were stacked against them, but they also knew this was just the beginning of a much larger game. As the days dragged on, the prosecution tightened its grip, leaving little room for doubt in the minds of the jury. The final blow came when a supposed eyewitness, a neighbor, testified that she saw two women matching the twins' description near Caldwell's mansion on the night of the murder. Her account, though shaky and inconsistent, was enough to seal the deal. By the time closing arguments were delivered, the outcome felt inevitable. Judge Grayson wasted no time in delivering his verdict: life in prison without parole for both Claire and Chloe. The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs as the gavel came down with a resounding thud. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment, while friends and supporters of the twins sat in stunned silence. Claire and Chloe, however, showed no signs of panic. As they were led away in handcuffs, they exchanged a fleeting smile, a silent promise that this wasn't over. While everyone else saw two defeated women being taken to prison, the twins saw an opportunity. Behind bars, they would have access to resources, people, and information that could help them uncover the truth. And more importantly, they would have each other. For now, they played the part of model prisoners, keeping their heads down and observing everything around them. But deep inside, their brilliant minds were already at work, piecing together a plan to expose the real killer and clear their names. Judge Grayson thought he had ended their story with a single strike of his gavel. What he didn't realize was that he had just set the stage for one of the most remarkable comebacks the legal world had ever seen. Life behind bars was harsh, but Claire and Chloe were determined not to let it break them. From the moment they entered the prison, they began observing everything: the routines, the guards, the inmates, and even the smallest details of daily life. They quickly realized that survival in this unfamiliar world required more than just strength. It demanded intelligence, patience, and strategy. The twins had all three in abundance. At first, the other inmates treated them with suspicion. Who were these quiet, well-spoken women who seemed so out of place in a sea of hardened criminals? But Claire and Chloe knew better than to isolate themselves. Instead, they started small, offering help where they could. When an older inmate named Rita struggled to fill out paperwork for an appeal, Chloe stepped in, guiding her through the process with kindness and precision. Word spread fast among the prisoners. The new arrivals weren't just smart, they were useful. Soon, more inmates began approaching them for advice. One woman needed help drafting a letter to her children's school. Another wanted guidance on how to file a complaint about unfair treatment by a guard. Claire and Chloe handled each request with care, earning trust and respect along the way. What the other inmates didn't know was that the twins were using these interactions to learn about the inner workings of the prison system and uncover its secrets. Behind closed doors, or rather, behind locked cell bars, the twins devised their plan. They communicated through coded messages written in library books and whispered conversations during mealtime. Their goal was clear: prove their innocence and expose the truth about Caldwell's murder. To do this, they needed allies both inside and outside the prison walls. On the outside, they relied on trusted friends and former colleagues to investigate leads and gather evidence. Inside, they focused on building relationships with key individuals who might have valuable information. One such individual was a tough but fair-minded guard named Officer Daniels. Though strict, he wasn't cruel, and he noticed something different about the twins. When Chloe casually mentioned that she'd once represented someone in a wrongful termination case similar to his situation, he warmed up to her. Over time, he became an unwitting ally, slipping them bits of information when no one was watching. Meanwhile, Claire discovered something troubling within the prison itself: a pattern of corruption involving stolen supplies and bribes. While this wasn't directly related to their case, it gave them leverage. By subtly exposing some of the wrongdoing to higher authorities through anonymous tips, they gained favor with certain officials who owed them a debt of gratitude. As weeks turned into months, the twins transformed their grim surroundings into a base of operations. They studied legal texts from the prison library, drafted motions, and strategized ways to reopen their case. Every setback only fueled their determination. For Claire and Chloe, this wasn't just about escaping prison. It was about proving that even in the darkest places, justice could still shine through. And deep down, they knew that their greatest weapon wasn't physical strength or brute force. It was their unshakable bond and unparalleled intellect. Together, they were unstoppable. Claire and Chloe's investigation into Caldwell's murder was a delicate balancing act. They knew they couldn't afford to draw attention to themselves, so they worked quietly, piecing together clues like detectives in the shadows. Their first step was to gather information from the outside world. Using carefully worded letters smuggled out by sympathetic visitors, they reached out to former colleagues and friends who owed them favors. These allies became their eyes and ears, digging into Caldwell's life and uncovering secrets that had been buried deep. One of their most trusted contacts was Emily, a young paralegal who had interned with them years ago. Emily was sharp and resourceful, and she understood the gravity of the situation. Following the twins' instructions, she began poring over Caldwell's financial records. What she found was startling. Large sums of money had been funneled into offshore accounts shortly before his death. The transactions were linked to his business partner, a man named Victor Langston. It seemed Victor had been embezzling funds for months, and Caldwell had likely discovered the scheme. But proving this connection wouldn't be easy. The twins needed hard evidence, something concrete that could tie Victor to the crime. That's when Claire remembered something crucial. Caldwell's personal assistant, Sarah, had once consulted them about workplace harassment involving Victor. Could Sarah have witnessed something important? Through coded messages sent via Emily, they managed to track her down. At first, Sarah was hesitant to talk, fearing retaliation. But when Claire assured her of their discretion and promised protection, she agreed to meet secretly. The meeting took place in a quiet park, far from prying eyes. Sarah revealed that Caldwell had planned to confront Victor about the embezzlement days before his death. She also mentioned overhearing an argument between them, a heated exchange where Victor threatened Caldwell. This was exactly the kind of lead the twins needed. Armed with this new information, they instructed Emily to file a formal complaint with the police, urging them to investigate Victor further. Back inside the prison, Chloe focused on another angle, exposing weaknesses in the prosecution's case against them. She noticed inconsistencies in the forensic reports, details that didn't add up. For instance, the fingerprints allegedly found at the scene matched Claire's, but were smudged in a way that suggested tampering. Chloe drafted a detailed motion highlighting these flaws, which Emily submitted to the court under the guise of coming from an anonymous source. Despite their progress, the twins faced constant obstacles. Every move they made seemed to be monitored by someone on the outside, someone determined to keep them locked away. Suspicious notes appeared in their cell, warning them to stop digging. Even some of the guards started treating them differently, as if trying to intimidate them into silence. But Claire and Chloe refused to back down. If anything, the threats only strengthened their resolve. As weeks turned into months, the pieces of the puzzle slowly came together. Victor's motives were clear, and the evidence against him was mounting. Yet the twins knew they weren't out of danger yet. Proving their innocence while trapped behind bars required not just intelligence but timing and patience. They continued playing the long game, biding their time until the moment was right to strike. And through it all, they leaned on each other, their bond unbreakable, their determination unwavering. Justice might have been delayed, but it wouldn't be denied, not as long as Claire and Chloe Harper were fighting for it. The turning point came when Claire and Chloe discovered a program that allowed inmates to participate in work release assignments. These short outings were meant to give prisoners a chance to contribute to society. But for the twins, it was an opportunity they couldn't pass up. They volunteered enthusiastically, knowing these brief moments of freedom could be their ticket to gathering critical evidence. Each time they stepped outside the prison walls, Claire and Chloe worked with precision and purpose. Their first stop was often the local library, where they scoured newspapers and public records for anything related to Caldwell's business dealings. Using fake IDs provided by a sympathetic friend on the outside, they accessed restricted documents that revealed even more about Victor Langston's shady activities. One discovery stood out: forged contracts linking Victor directly to the embezzlement scheme. It was the smoking gun they had been searching for. But collecting evidence wasn't enough. They needed to make sure it reached the right hands without raising suspicion. To do this, they relied on coded messages hidden in books and letters sent to Emily, who acted as their intermediary. She carefully compiled the information into formal legal motions and appeals, submitting them under the guise of coming from anonymous sources or concerned citizens. Each motion chipped away at the prosecution's case, forcing the courts to take notice. Inside the prison, the twins continued building alliances. They helped inmates draft petitions and file grievances, earning loyalty and protection in return. One day, while assisting a fellow prisoner named Lisa, they stumbled upon something unexpected: a letter addressed to Lisa from her brother, who happened to work at Caldwell's company. The letter casually mentioned overhearing Victor bragging about getting rid of a problem around the time of Caldwell's death. This casual remark was gold to the twins. With Lisa's permission, they included the letter as part of their growing dossier. Meanwhile, their reputation as master strategists spread beyond the prison walls. Friends and former clients began rallying to their cause, organizing protests and speaking to journalists about the injustices they believed the twins faced. Public pressure mounted, drawing attention to flaws in the original trial and demanding answers. Even some of the guards softened toward them, quietly admitting they found the situation suspicious. Back in court, the twins' carefully crafted motions started making waves. Judges were forced to acknowledge the inconsistencies in the forensic reports and the lack of solid evidence tying Claire and Chloe to the crime scene. The prosecution scrambled to defend its case, but cracks were beginning to show. Every motion filed was a calculated move designed to expose the truth and embarrass Judge Grayson, whose rushed verdict now looked reckless. As momentum shifted in their favor, the twins prepared for their final gambit. They knew the key to overturning their conviction lay not just in proving their innocence, but also in exposing the real killer. And with Victor Langston's name now firmly in the spotlight, they were ready to strike. Claire and Chloe exchanged a glance one evening in their cell, their expressions resolute. The pieces were falling into place, and soon the world would see what two genius attorneys, wrongfully imprisoned, could achieve. Justice might have been delayed, but it was finally within reach. As the tide began to turn in their favor, Claire and Chloe dug deeper into the shadows of Caldwell's murder and uncovered something that sent chills down their spines. While reviewing old court documents and financial records, they stumbled upon a connection no one had noticed before: Judge Lawrence Grayson himself. It turned out that Grayson had borrowed a significant sum of money from Caldwell years ago, a debt he had never fully repaid. This revelation was explosive. If true, it meant the judge had a personal stake in the case, making his harsh verdict against them not just unfair, but potentially corrupt. The twins knew this information could blow the entire case wide open, but they also understood the risks. Exposing the sitting judge wouldn't be easy, especially when they were still behind bars. They decided to act cautiously, gathering as much evidence as possible before going public. Through Emily, their trusted ally on the outside, they obtained copies of loan agreements and bank statements that hinted at Grayson's ties to Caldwell. They even managed to track down an anonymous source within the courthouse who confirmed that Grayson had been unusually invested in the outcome of the trial. With the evidence mounting, Claire and Chloe hatched a bold plan. They leaked the story to a journalist named Rachel Meyer, known for her investigative reporting on corruption in the justice system. At first, Rachel was skeptical. After all, accusing a judge of misconduct was no small claim. but the twins' meticulously organized files left little room for doubt. Rachel agreed to write an expose, ensuring the story would reach the public quickly. The article hit the newsstands like a bombshell. Headlines screamed about Judge Grayson's alleged conflict of interest, sparking outrage across the town. Calls for an investigation flooded local government offices, and pressure mounted on higher courts to review the twins' case. For the first time since their arrest, Claire and Chloe felt a glimmer of hope. But they weren't done yet. Inside the prison, they continued filing motions, each one more compelling than the last. They argued that Grayson's involvement in the case violated their right to a fair trial and demanded a retrial. Their arguments were sharp, logical, and impossible to ignore. Even some of the guards started whispering that the twins might actually pull off the impossible. Meanwhile, the fallout from the expose reached Victor Langston. Panicked by the sudden scrutiny, he made a fatal mistake. He tried to flee the country. Authorities intercepted him at the airport with forged passports and incriminating documents in his possession. Among them were emails detailing his plans to frame Claire and Chloe, along with instructions to plant evidence at the crime scene. It was undeniable proof of his guilt. As the world watched, the pieces of the puzzle finally fit together. The real killer had been caught, and the judge who had wrongfully sentenced the twins now faced accusations of corruption. Claire and Chloe sat in their cell, reading the latest headlines with quiet satisfaction. Justice was closing in, and they knew their freedom was just around the corner. All they had to do now was step back into the courtroom and finish what they had started. The day of the retrial arrived, and the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Reporters packed the benches, cameras flashed, and whispers filled the air as Claire and Chloe entered, dressed in borrowed suits that barely fit, but somehow made them look unstoppable. For the first time since their arrest, they stepped forward not as defendants hiding behind a public defender, but as the brilliant attorneys they truly were. The judge overseeing the case this time was Judge Margaret Hayes, a no-nonsense woman known for her fairness and sharp mind. She wasted no time getting down to business. Claire stood first, her voice steady and commanding. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her eyes scanning the room with quiet authority. "What you're about to hear is not just a defense, it's the truth." With surgical precision, she dismantled the prosecution's original case piece by piece. She highlighted the inconsistencies in the forensic evidence, pointing out how the fingerprints had been smudged and deliberately altered to match hers. She presented documents showing Victor Langston's embezzlement scheme and his motive for silencing Caldwell. Every word she spoke was backed by facts, leaving no room for doubt. When it was Chloe's turn, she focused on exposing the corruption that had tainted the original trial. Holding up copies of loan agreements and bank statements, she revealed Judge Grayson's financial ties to Caldwell. "This isn't just about us being wrongfully convicted," Chloe said, her tone firm yet impassioned. "It's about a broken system where justice can be manipulated by those in power. We are here today not only to clear our names but to ensure this never happens again." The prosecution fought back fiercely, trying to poke holes in the twins' arguments. But Claire and Chloe anticipated every move, countering with irrefutable evidence and razor-sharp logic. When the prosecutor attempted to discredit their findings, claiming they were fabricated, Claire calmly produced affidavits from witnesses like Sarah, Caldwell's assistant, who corroborated their story under oath. By the end of the trial, even the harshest skeptics in the room seemed convinced of their innocence. As closing arguments concluded, Judge Hayes addressed the jury. "This case has uncovered disturbing truths," she said gravely. "It is your duty to weigh the evidence carefully and deliver a verdict based solely on the facts before you." Hours later, the jury returned with their decision: not guilty. Cheers erupted in the courtroom as Claire and Chloe embraced, tears streaming down their faces. Justice had finally been served. But the twins weren't finished yet. Before leaving the courthouse, they filed a formal complaint against Judge Grayson, demanding accountability for his role in their wrongful conviction. As news cameras captured their triumphant exit, Claire turned to Chloe and smiled. "We did it," she whispered. "But this is just the beginning."